Calls it a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires. Swing and a drive. Deep left field. It's his way back. Walk him off. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel. Today, we've got a special guest. Jeffrey Paternostro, the lead prospect writer at Baseball Prospectus, is joining us. Jeffrey, you guys have had a busy few weeks. Lots of prospect stuff coming out. Your top 101 released. How you feeling with all that churning?
Well, I filed my last team list. Well, we'll say early this morning, because late last night is not entirely accurate. So I guess I'm on vacation for at least a couple
There you go. Well, awesome. Well, let's jump right in. I mean, I love talking prospects when it comes to the Dodgers. You guys have tons of great content. So I'll start with sort of a general question, which is the Dodgers have long had one of the better farm systems in baseball. They consistently have guys that feel like they're in top 100 type lists. How would you describe the state of the Dodgers farm system top to bottom? Is it a top-heavy group? Is it a deep group? Where do they stand maybe relative to previous years?
So generally speaking, unless you're maybe an organization like the Tampa Bay Rays, where you're constantly looking to add depth to your farm system and work with this sort of pipeline of young players, your farm system is going to have ebbs and flows. And the Dodgers were one of the top 5 systems or so in baseball a few years ago, and they're on a little downswing. It's a little dip right now, but it's for the right reasons, because they've graduated top prospects into their major league roster in meaningful roles. You know, guys like Gavin Lux and Dustin May, who I know is out with Tommy John surgery, or they've traded them for meaningful major league pieces. They sent Kuiper Ruiz and Josiah Gray out for Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. So the idea of a farm system, good or bad, preferably good, is that it will give you major league players. It will be a pipeline of major league players. Now, you can do that by developing them into major league players, which the Dodgers have done a very good job of, or you can use it to trade them for established major league players, which the Dodgers will also do. But the reality is they don't have the depth they had a few years ago. It's still a very good system at the top, and they have some players, maybe not for 2022 roster consideration, but 2023, 2024, certainly I think a lot of these top guys could at least be in the conversation for roster spots. And look at the top of the list, so with Miguel Vargas, who I'm sure we're going to get into. He's a guy that played in Double-A last year. It's not impossible he's a major league factor in 2022. So, but really beyond the top 4 or 5 guys, it's a little bit shallower than it's been in years past. I'd say, broadly speaking, because they have 4 top 101 guys and a couple more that were in consideration, they're probably somewhere in an average tier, somewhere in the 12 to 18 range. I did org rankings for the book, but I could not tell you offhand, but I actually wrote for them. But I think they're around
totally. Well, and one of the things, again, like you said, we're going to get to the 4 guys who find themselves in the top 101. You have a couple guys right off of that list: Ryan Pepio, Michael Busch. I'm curious, just when we talk about the top end of this class, where would you say the drop is? Is it before Pepio at number 5? Is it after Pepio and before Busch, or is Busch kind of the end of a top tier in your mind?
I think it's Busch. Busch was a top 101 prospect for us coming into the season, and he did not have a bad year, all in all. He struggled a bit in the first half, especially with swing and miss, and for admittedly a polished college bat, he didn't have a 2020 season. We got good reports from Instructs. To get dropped right into Double-A, I think it's fair there's some adjustment time. It's a little bit of a limited upside profile, so he's really going to have to hit. There's going to have to be performance over tools here. And because the performance in Double-A wasn't great, he probably got passed by some other guys in the system and some other guys nationally. But I think he could definitely be a good major league regular still. It's 20-ish home runs. Second baseman now, can probably play a few other spots as well. Good hitter, gets on base a little bit. It's not a huge, loud offensive upside, but just like a nice hitter that, maybe he's a 5-day-of-the-week guy. Dodgers like doing load management and moving guys around based on pitching matchups, or just trying to keep guys rested, or valuing positional flexibility. I think he fits into that that sort of mold. Is like, you wouldn't necessarily call him a sure shot starter, but a very nice piece.
Okay,
of
let me ask a follow up real quick, broadly speaking, and this might be a totally unfair question. When you see when a fan sees one of their guys in the top 101 prospect list, the type list that you put out, are there sort of tiers like, hey, if it's a top 50 guy, then this is maybe a future all-star, and if it's a top 10 guy, like how if a guy's in the top 100, is that a future all-star? Is that a future starter? Obviously, this ebbs and flows year to year, but generally speaking, how do you evaluate those types of things?
So there is definitely tiers. I would say the future all-stars, what we would call the OFP 70s, usually between 15 and 25 guys. I think this year it was 22 for us. So yeah, if you want to say a top 25 prospect is a future all-star, potential future all-star, generally speaking, that's for most people, I think, going to be the cutoff, give or take, whatever the year's class looks like. Beyond that, sort of what we would call the hard OFP 6, the plus regulars, and those are guys that will make all-star games, but the OFP 70 is more of a perennial all-star. Those tend to run, next 30 or 40 spots. Again, can vary a lot by year. And then, in all honesty, the difference between Michael Busch and Andy Paz is not significant to me. It just isn't. I believe Paz was in like the 80s. Busch, I could go back and look at our long list. I'm guessing was somewhere between 125 and 150. You pick and choose stuff. You got to make decisions on what you want to weight, whether it's proximity, whether it's upside, whether it's injury history, recent performance. Sometimes we just like a guy and find a spot for him in the 90s. There's a few guys like that this year and every year. But the tier from really, you could make a case Bobby Miller is a 60, and it's a little different with pitchers. I just want to see a little bit more from him. In terms of how his stuff holds up over the longer haul, or a longer, healthier season, or longer outings before I make that call. But the stuff is certainly, what we would call mid-rotation or better quality. But beyond that, it's like, you're looking at guys that are above average regulars, and Busch maybe doesn't have the upside of a Pages or a Miller, but he's also hitting AA and has some proximity going for him as well. So yes, there are definitely tiers. I would say the Dodgers don't have one of those top 25 guys.
Yeah,
man, we love Miguel Vargas.
He's next on my list.
Love Miguel Vargas. If you wanted to make a case that he's an OFP 70, I'd listen to it. He's not all that dissimilar from some of the corner bats we did rank higher. With him, it's just there's a few different things going on there. The performance is great. There's the question of what his future positional value is, although everyone I've talked to, everyone on our team that's seen him, thinks he can play third base. You watch him play, like, it's soft hands, he moves all right, it's a good arm. Like, look, he's a big guy. It's you look at that frame and you're like, but he's pretty athletic for his size, and the Dodgers, being the Dodgers, are playing him at second base more than first base when they're going to move him around. And that's the thing they like to do. And I think there is something more broadly speaking we're seeing where teams like the Dodgers, organizations that have very good analytics departments or are more analytically inclined, are more willing to be flexible with sort of like infield defensive positioning. If you do certain, like, they believe that, maybe Vargas isn't the most fleet of foot, but we can put him in the right spot. He does everything else really well. Well, when you're specifically looking at first base defense, it's a very discrete set of skills that you need to have in terms of sort of your hands and your footwork. That's a little different from playing other infield positions. It's like the old Moneyball quote. It's incredibly hard. It is and it isn't. Like, you put a guy there if you want to get his bat in the lineup, but I do think we've maybe gotten to the point where the long and the short of it is, I think Miguel Vargas is a better second baseman than Max Muncy.
Well, on the train of Vargas, you hinted at it. He's a guy you like. Yeah. You guys have perpetually been way higher on him than other places. Other places are starting to catch up, which I'm sure is a little bit encouraging to you. They're not quite as high. You guys have stayed ahead and moved him up the list. What do you think it is about Vargas? And look, when you look at all the different lists out there, of course, people aren't going to have consensus on where, the 40th best player versus the 80th best player, whatever. But what do you think it is about Vargas that you guys have liked so much historically that maybe got you on his train a little bit earlier?
So I think there's two things here. The first is we just got good early reports on him. And a lot of this, a lot of the game, quote unquote, of prospect list making is who you talk to and the information you can get. But the second part of it is, and this is the backbone of our lists, are going to games and seeing the players. And we had a lot of West Coast California coverage. So we saw Miguel Vargas a lot in A-ball. I believe we saw him in the Midwest League as well. And again, everybody on our team that saw him was like, this is a guy. He can hit. And I understand that because he didn't really actualize the raw power into game power until this year, you're looking at a bigger corner bat with some good bat to ball skills, but that's not really hitting for the kind of power you associate with a corner bat, especially if you don't think he's going to be a third baseman. We always thought the power would come, and it certainly came this year. We got good reports from the alternate site last year as well. And because, look, I don't read other sites' lists, especially when I'm in the process, but I hear things. It's impossible. People just send me stuff unsolicited. And I generally have a feel for maybe when we're out on a limb a little bit on a guy. And because we were with Vargas, I maybe checked in on Miguel Vargas a little bit more than I did Cade Cavalli, because everyone likes Cade Cavalli or whatever. Yeah. Take any example of like a guy in that general range that there's more industry consensus on. But I don't mind being out there on a player. Sometimes it works for us, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes all you can do is refine your process, look at the reasons you were right or wrong on a guy, and go for there. But what it really comes down to is, we saw Miguel Vargas early as a professional, and we both filed and heard reports on him that were consistent with a future plus regular, which is generally the tier we've ranked him in over the last 3 years. And he hasn't really, again, actualizing the game power is good, but he hasn't really changed. But every time he performs at a higher level, we get a little more certain about that major league upside, a little more confident that, even if the bat regresses a little bit against better pitching, there's still like an average regular floor there. So he just
all right. So the other three guys outside of Vargas that you've got in your top 101, we've got Cartaya, Miller, and Pages. Pages being another guy that you sort of are a little bit higher on than some other places. But what would be your 30-second elevator pitch for each of those three guys as to why they made the top 101?
Cartaya, it's pretty simple. We ranked a lot of catchers this year, which I'm not always super comfortable with. But if Cartaya plays to projection, he'd be one of the 2 or 3 best offensive catchers in baseball. Dodgers already have one of them, but that's more of a long-term problem to deal with if it comes to fruition. The issue with him is he's had durability concerns, and beyond that, we're not sure he's a catcher long-term. The bat would play at other positions, but he's a much better catching prospect than he is a first base prospect or a right field prospect just because of the positional value. The other thing there to keep in mind with is the actual issue is he's a little stiff receiving. And if the automatic ball strike system comes to baseball in the next few years, and they're moving it up to the AAA West, the old PCL this year, that does change the calculus on catcher evaluation in general. I think there's still going to be a limit to how creative teams get with who they'll put back there, just because your pitchers have to be comfortable throwing to them. That's still important. There's a lot of soft skills beyond just the ability to steal strikes, or as the catching instructors say, make strikes look like strikes, which is sort of the sneaky hidden value there as well. So with him, it's just you're hoping that the defense, the framing specifically, improves, and it is a teachable skill, or it becomes a non-issue for the profile, and you just put him back there and let him hit 280 with 30 home runs every year. For Bobby Miller, Miller is a guy that can help your team in a lot of ways, especially in your pitching staff. Like, he is a perfect Dodgers pitching prospect where it's not really clear. He has 3 above average pitches, but the command's always been a little, and there was like reliever risk with him coming out of college. Although that was more, he didn't have that third pitch, and now he does with the changeup. And he seems like a guy that's going to be a Tony Gonsolin or a Julio Urias or a Victor Gonzalez. He's got a little, maybe he doesn't have better stuff than Gonsolin, but he's got major league starter quality stuff, certainly. It's just how many of these sort of 4 to 5 inning guys can you roster at one time? And, when you have a couple workhorse starters the other days, and you can sort of piggyback or work after openers, and you're this good at player development too, so you can develop these kind of one-inning relievers behind them too, and don't have to go out on the market. You can go claim Phil Bickford and turn him into a decent reliever. You don't have to move your pitching prospects fully into that role. You can be a little more creative with how you deploy your pitching staff over 162. And look, there's a chance he comes out next year, shoves, stays healthy, and looks like a mid-rotation starter, or even a little bit better. The stuff could tick up past that. And he's just a guy you hand the ball every fifth day to, and don't worry about it. It's just because of the background and some of the injury issues he's had. Until we see it, it just sort of makes the profile a little more high variance. Some of the arms ahead of him on the 101, and there's a little more reliever risk. But again, the short and sweet of it there is 3 above average pitches can help your pitching staff in a multitude of ways, depending on how the durability and command progress in the coming seasons. Pages is big bombs, dingers, home runs, big boys, whatever you want to call them. He hits the ball incredibly hard. This is a profile that is pretty divisive internally. Myself and our fellow senior prospect writer, Jarrett Seidler, really disagree on how much we think hitters can improve their hit tool, basically, is what it comes down to. And it's what is the underlying reason for swing and miss, I think. His approach is okay. He just swings really hard and tries to uppercut everything. So when you see that kind of swing and miss in the zone, I think you can be a little more concerned, because it's not like he's picking the wrong pitches to swing at. It's not like a swing decision thing per se. It's just if there's better stuff in the zone, like if you get a pitcher that can move it around, or maybe start, everybody's going to swing and miss at better major league quality breaking stuff. That's why we call them out pitches, basically. For Pages, it's going to be, is he a mistake hitter, or is he a guy that can hit a pitcher's pitch in the zone hard? And I don't think we know that yet. And there's certainly some risk that in Double A is sort of where we see this profile really tested, because you get pitchers at that level that have major league time that will throw you 2-1 off speed when you're gearing up to that fastball 400 feet, which he's not going to see it, in the low minors. So we think on upside, because of the power projection, he can be an impact middle of the order bat. So that's what's put him on the list based on the the reports we got from him this year, and the general underlying performance and the sort of the tools projection. But he's a guy where I think it's going to move one way or the other pretty quickly next year, and we'll have more information then. But again, I think he does fit broadly into the subset of the back end 101 guy.
Got it. Okay, so we talked briefly about Michael Busch already. We'll skip over Pepio a little bit, but I guess the first surprise that I think to a Dodger fan as they're looking down your top 10 prospect list would be Maddox Bruns, and not surprise in the sense of anything other than this is kind of his first go-round on a list like this. The Dodgers' first-round pick last year. He made just 4 starts, 5 innings. I mean, based on the numbers, I'm assuming there's not a whole lot of stock that's being put into that. But I guess my question, I'll frame it this way. He's not even 20 years old yet, but you've got him ahead of Landon Knack, Clayton Beeter, some other guys, right in with Pepio. How do you talk me through sort of the process of maybe those 4 pitchers in particular, and where you decided to rank them as you did?
Sure. So this is one of the things we do when making a list like this, is you want to balance, upside versus likelihood, projection versus floor. And Beeter and Knack are far more likely to pitch in the majors than Maddox Bruns, just based on what we know so far. They are far more likely to be, back end, like let's say they're 35th or 40th percentile outcome. So they don't quite play to projection. Probably more likely to be a useful major leaguer than Maddox Bruns. Once you start getting past that, once you start looking at what Bruns brings to the table as a pitcher, and again, this doesn't play in specifically to how we do things per se, but what Dodgers player development brings to the table with developing this kind of arm. I described him and Peter Hubeck in the list as a heat check for their pitching development, because they are high variance prep arms, basically. So, there's a chance that Maddox Bruns I don't want to say doesn't make it a double A, because he probably will make it a double A. He's a first-round pick. Those guys get chances. And while he was maybe considered a little bit of an overdraft for where he was, I think he was, it was more maybe more supplemental first than late first. But as much as that kind of stuff matters. But he's a guy that has 3 pitches, which for a prep arm is unusual. Like, I'm not going to say it's a great change, because almost no prep pitcher has one. I described it as better than you expect, which for me is like a top tier prep changeup. It's like better than you expect, has some feel for developmental project, or doesn't need it. I say doesn't need it, it means he probably doesn't have one. But he's got feel for a 12-6 curve too, and that's like a pretty good pitch. And he came out in the complex and wasn't sitting upper 90s, and I don't know, that could be a developmental thing where the Dodgers saying don't want him maxing out this early. So he is way more of a mystery box than Landon Knack or Clayton Beeter or some of the other, Andre Jackson, some of those arms that we ranked behind him. But I think you look at that sort of group of guys and you ask me who is got the best chance to be an impact arm in the rotation. It's Maddox Bruns. Now, if you wanted to say, well, that's not likely, Jeffrey, then yes, and you wanted to weight that appropriately and put him behind those arms. Really, I said the tier drop off. There's a clear tier after 6, and then we can go 7 to like 15. I think you rank those guys however you want. Some of this is draft pedigree. I talked to some scouts that saw him, and they did not agree on him either. I think he was kind of a divisive pick in that regard, but. You get a left-handed prep arm with that kind of velocity and that kind of feel for secondaries.
And like you said, I mean, if you're the Dodgers who have a history of developing folks like that, I like how you put it, that it was a heat check. All right, 2 more questions. We'll get you out of here, and I'll shift sort of from specific guys to more broad-based questions. When you look at the Dodgers, one of the things that kind of plagued them last year was sort of a gap between the farm system and the major league level, in a sense that they didn't really have folks ready to make that jump. Andre Jackson, Mitch White, a couple guys who were sort of serviceable, but they had a bunch of like quad A type outfielders that just were completely useless at the major league level. I'm curious, from your perspective, are there any rookies or maybe guys like White and Jackson making a jump? Are there names that maybe could actually contribute and help this team on the field in 2022?
So yeah, that is still a little bit of a gap you have to worry about at this point. I mean, as much as you as a Dodgers fan, exactly. You can always just spend. You can always cover. These are the kind of things you can cover with money. Like you can't find a Miguel Vargas, but you can. And I like Andre Jackson. I think he's going to be a useful major league arm, and he's certainly a guy that I think could take a step forward, given the development he's already seen on the changeup. But it is kind of a thing where it's like, well, the sort of the AA and AAA team rosters were a little less interesting from a prospect standpoint, from a impact arm. You're really looking at like bullpen arms in a lot of cases, because when you want to look at bats, you want to look like, again, I don't hate to bring it back to Miguel Vargas if I'm honest, but if you want to look at the guy that I think could really, if I'm just looking at this list, make a big impact on the 2021 team or 2022 team. I got to remember what year it is now. It's Miguel Vargas, because he's a guy where if he's on the major league roster, it means he's hit his way there. And I think he's certainly capable of doing that. I don't know if he starts in AA or AAA. I don't know how much he has left to prove in AA, in all honesty, based on what he did the second half of the year there. But I think he could be a guy. And Ryan Pepiot, who I know we didn't talk about in any great detail, and is a guy, again, pitched in AAA last year, fits that kind of 3 to 5 inning, 1 to 2 times to the order role that the Dodgers like. He got an uptick in fastball velocity. If you're into the TrackMan stuff, his shape and his axis are a lot better as well. So it's not just a velocity jump; it's more of a riding pitch now, more of a flat approach. So, another thing the Dodgers are certainly very good at is getting those kind of gains out of players as well. So I think he's the guy where Pepiot and Jackson specifically, if they do need to fill spots in the rotation or in that sort of the 3 to 5 inning Tony Gonsolin, Julio Arias, Victor Gonzalez role, I think those are the 2 names you really want to look at for 2022 impact.
Okay. Last question is probably the question you get asked the most. Who are we missing? Are there guys outside of the Dodgers top 10 that sort of, and you've even talked about maybe there's some guys that you really like, but you couldn't find a reason to get them into number 10, but guys to look for in the future?
So I did say it's a little bit of a shallower system, which is true. There actually are a lot of interesting sort of next tier down guys that can maybe take a step forward out of that A-ball team. A lot of interesting arms, but I think the big name that we didn't mention is Wilman Diaz, and there's a reason for that. He was their big 7-figure IFA signing last year. He didn't hit in the DSL, and I don't think that actually matters, but my general philosophy is, and I don't necessarily follow through on this, it's going to depend on the individual player, is that there's no real reason to consider these guys for prospect lists this early in their pro careers. So next year, I assume he'll come stateside or at least be at Instructs. You'll have a lot more information about him, and I think at that time we can sort of reevaluate where he is as a prospect. I think he's the guy most likely to be in the top 10 of this system that wasn't in the top 10 this year. And somebody will say to me, like, again, I said I don't read other lists, so I don't know if other people ranked him in the top 10 already. They'll say, well, he was already a top 10 prospect. Like maybe he was, but I don't have enough actionable information there right now to say that. And we've seen plenty of 7-figure IFAs because of the nature of that market, and just you can say this about American amateur players in the draft too. The best players at 16, and these players are not agreeing to deals at 16, to be clear, are not necessarily the best players at 18. Some of them are. Wander Franco was the best player, best 14-year-old player when he was 14, the best 16-year-old player when he was 16. He's the best 20-year-old player now. So there are certainly players that follow that track. Vlad Guerrero Jr. was in that general class. Juan Soto was probably in that general class as well. Although I think he's a year younger than Acuna, so I guess he does qualify there for 24-year-olds, or he might only be 23. Actually, he's younger than Rushman, so I think he's only 23. God. So the short answer is there's usually a 17-year-old IFA signing or an 18-year-old recent IFA signing that will take a jump next year. I just don't have enough information to tell you who it is, which I know is roundly unsatisfying.
It's all right. At some point, you have to be realistic. There's enough projecting that you guys are doing already in these types of lists that you have to draw the line somewhere. And a guy who hasn't even come stateside and you have very little information on seems like a reasonable place to draw it. So, hey, Jeffrey, we appreciate your time. Where can people find your stuff, get more information, and click to subscribe?
So we just wrapped our 101 week at Baseball Prospectus. We've got a few more team lists running through the end of the month. So you can go to baseballprospectus.com, subscribe there. The team list, if you want to look at the 101, is completely free on the website. It's in the drop down under prospects. I'm pretty sure you can look at the 101 from this year, download it, sort it, find the Dodgers prospects on it pretty easily. Beyond that, we have the Baseball Prospectus Annual, our 2022 preview, 2021 review with capsules for basically every player that played in the majors, top prospects, our PECOTA projections for next year. It's a big tome. It's 600-700 pages. Also has our 101 in it with more details about each of the players. They get full write-ups as well. You can pre-order that now. I'm guessing it's probably going to start shipping in the next week or two. And on the heels of that, we have the Futures Guide, which is all our team lists, some Dynasty Fantasy content as well, which will probably be shipping. I just filed my last list with that for book stuff, as I said yesterday morning. So it should be going to the printer by the end of the week and probably be ready for spring training if that actually starts on time.
Love it. Well, Jeffrey, we appreciate your time as always. You guys do great work, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So thanks as always, and best of luck the rest of the year.
Thanks, anytime.